Welcome, everybody, to Better Equipped. I am here with a special guest, a dear brother to me, Michael Perez. Thank you so much for being here.
Awesome to be here with you today.
Man, Michael, you've meant so much to me, and I know that when I met you and just seeing the passion and zeal out of you was really just initially encouraging to me. And then as I've gotten to know you, just your story and the passion that God has put in your heart, paired with your background and story and expertise, has been something that has been just incredibly encouraging to me. And that was even before you wrote a book and things like that. But how much cooler is that you get to share that with an even broader audience? We'll talk about that a little bit. But Thank you for being here and just what you've meant to me in my life. And I'm excited for people out here to listen in and be blessed and encouraged by your wisdom and experience.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Oh, good. So let's start with, we're going to get in your story. Again, you wrote this book.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll talk a little bit. We're going to talk about faith and finances, which is what this book is awesome. And so we'll talk about that, but that topic. But let's start with your story a little bit. Real high level, did you always follow Jesus? Did you always were you always this passionate and devoted to Jesus in your life? Or when did that happen in your life?
Yeah, I like many people, I grew up in the Catholic Church and attended church, and so God was in our household. And like many people, once I became an adult, started questioning a lot of things. Never stopped believing in God, but kind of drifted away from the church. And then probably about 20 years ago, had a friend who introduced me to another friend, and this individual just started feeding into me and just started looking at things differently. And by May 16th, 2004, I had found a church, got baptized, and so I've been on this incredible journey with Jesus for now over 20 years.
Yeah, happy 20 years to you, man. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. So you were already in the financial advisory sector, right? Is that what you would call it?
Yes.
You were already doing that before 2004, right?
I came into the financial services industry in 1992.
All right. That was a good year.
Yeah.
All right. So you're already doing that. Jesus really gets a hold of your life in a whole different way. And we're all on this journey, so it's not like everything happened in 2004, but
right.
How did that affect your line of work and your mindset? How did it, because your book, and your passion is faith and finances and helping people understand through the biblical lens of how those come together. So for you, invite people in that journey on a personal level, what that really meant or looked like for you to figure out what God really, how he views that.
Yeah. So 2004, I get baptized. I find a church to go to. And so now the church is feeding into me. The people at the church are feeding into me. And probably the biggest event that really set me on this journey with faith and finances was 2008. I'm sitting in church on a Sunday morning. They brought in a guest speaker from Dallas, Fort Worth. He had a kind of a mega church down there, a guy named Barry Cameron. And I remember sitting there and he was preaching on a book that he had written called The ABCs of Financial Freedom. And I don't know what happened that day, but something that he was saying, I was like, I need to think about this a little bit more and look into this. And so when the service was over, I ran down to the church bookstore, bought his book, read it in less than a week.
Yeah.
And that really started me on the journey of turning inward and saying, what would it look like if I started to live out my faith through my finances? And so when people ask me, how long have you been on this journey with faith and finances? I can trace it back to 2008. It's basically been 16 years.
Wow. That's really cool. Yeah, God knows what he's doing to insert the right things, and I even think God's using you in that way for a lot of people's lives. So just like he used not just that book, but that hey, this has got my attention. I pray this does too. So let's dive in a little bit to, I'm going to call it the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to narrow this down. So the world is a big place in some ways and small in other ways. Humans aren't that creatively different in some ways at the core level, but the problem that you see in most Christians, people who profess Jesus. Again, we're not the judge. We're not going to sit here and parcel out who's Christian, who's not at this moment, but I'm talking about people who profess the name of Jesus. What are some of the problems you see when it comes to their views, either unbiblical or unhealthy views of their finances, and whether separating that, or I'm gonna let you speak to that.
Yeah.
But what would you say is kind of the problem we're up against when you think of we're generalizing here, not everyone, but what's the problem at hand here?
I think when I look at this mission I'm on, and I try to explain to people why it's important, it really, in my mind, comes down to three things. One is money was talked about as much as any topic there was in the Bible.
Right.
And to me, the disconnect is it's one of the least things talked about in most churches. So
Jesus talked more about money and hell than anybody else in anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
So to me,
two things that people don't want to talk about.
There's a disconnect there. The other observation I have made over the years is that Christian or non-Christian, most people are like, okay, my money's over here, God's over here, and let's just kind of keep that separate.
Okay, yeah.
And I don't think you can do that. And then the last thing is, it seems to me, even in my own church, churches are now all about disciple making. We want to make disciples. We want to live out Matthew 28:19. But I think sometimes they forget 28:20, which is all about teaching, right? And so I don't know how we make disciples in the church if we're not willing to talk about money, because money is very, very important in our disciple walk.
Man, that is so true.
Yes.
I've heard the phrase, I didn't come up with the phrase, that people's wallet or pocketbook or whatever they call it is the last thing to be converted in a Christian.
I love
and just the point being that in our, and not to get too technical here just for people listening, but the word discipleship doesn't exist in the Bible, but disciple does. It's a noun. It's an identity. It's who you are. And what does it mean to live into the implications of being a follower of Jesus? That's what that means, as a follower, learner of Jesus. So when we think about that, we surrender everything to Jesus. What does it mean to actually surrender everything to Jesus?
Yes.
And that would absolutely include money, because we understand how money, and it doesn't have to be a bad way. It can be good or bad. Money, I always say, and I didn't come up with this either, money's agnostic. Money is neutral. Money itself is not the problem. The love of money, Jesus says, is the problem. But, or that Paul says to Timothy, but, money isn't the problem, but it makes its way into almost every facet of our lives, and therefore can make its way into every facet of our heart. And I loved reading about this in your book. I genuinely was, I thought it was insightful. Again, for those listening, I would encourage you to check the book out. It's on Amazon, and we'll talk more about it at the end. But it's both. You did a great job of it's like theological nuggets and really practical wisdom and advice nuggets all into one. And I actually loved the length of the book, because that just like something that was like, man, like I can do that.
Yeah.
Gave such a good starting point to know what questions I have. But one of the things you talk about is spending and what that tells a person or tells you about what they care about.
That's right.
And it's insightful to them in the way they actually view God and their faith. You mind elaborating on that and inviting people into your mindset on what spending, how the handling of money, what it tells us?
Yeah. So one of the things that I always say is this: all spending decisions are spiritual decisions.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, maybe have never thought about that.
Yeah.
And then one of the things, as you know, I'm very active in the Kingdom Advisor movement. One of the things I've learned is this thing we call O, Grow, Live, Give. Mm-hmm. And we talk about there's 5 uses of money. So I said O, Grow, Live, Give, which is only 4, but the O is represented by taxes and debt payments.
Right.
Okay.
And I saw the visual in the book, which is great. Yeah.
So the way to envision this is everybody has a pie, And we all have different size pies depending on what the Lord has blessed us with.
Right.
But no matter the size of your pie, you only get 5 pieces of pie.
Right.
So you got the O, which is taxes and debt payments. You got the grow, which is money you're saving for the future. You've got the give, which is your giving. And you've got the live, which is your lifestyle. These pieces of pie, they're all competing with each other. Like you can't make a decision in one piece of the pie without it affecting other pieces of the pie. So if you say, all right, we're going to increase our lifestyle, well, that money, either you're going to have to get a bigger pie, or you got to start taking that money from someplace else. Or if you say, we're going to be more generous, well, guess what? Same thing. You got to pull the money from someplace else. So that's the tension that everybody's dealing with, is this pie and those pieces of pie and how they're all interacting together. And so we walk side by side with people and help them figure out what is appropriate. And one of the things that always comes up, we talk about the live piece of pie, the lifestyle piece, and people will come to me and say, well, what do you think is the appropriate lifestyle? And I go, I have no idea. That's between you and God.
Sure, right.
And as I think I say in the book, we talk about, I think it's 1 Timothy 5:8, where, you are supposed to take care of your family, but what that looks like, once again, is between you and God.
Yeah, it takes a lot of discernment in the spirit in Scripture with brothers and sisters that you trust to dialogue that lifestyle piece, and especially in the world, the part of the world that we live in. It's like, well, are we comparing to Calcutta or Afghanistan? Are we comparing to our neighbor next door? And it's like, well, I think it is something that's really important to say, what does Scripture say? What's the heart posture here? And let that shape our priorities, our decisions, and as you say well, and as I believe that God has given us 100% of the pie.
Yeah.
It's all from God.
That's right.
And 100% of it, I think some people just think of that give category, that's the Lord's. But it's interesting because it's like, no, that's a specific way that you're stewarding that, which is important. And we're going to talk about that next, actually.
Yeah.
But it's 100% of the pie that should be under the same prayerful, Lord, how, in light of you and who you are and what you've given me, what does it look like to be faithful with the whole pie?
That's right.
And not be, hey, and we wouldn't think of it this way, but how am I selfish with these pieces of the pie, but then I feel generous in this generosity piece of the pie. It's like, no, that might be a specific way that you're selfless, but it's really thinking even like toward your family, what does that look like? Toward, the right responsibilities that, keeping up with your debt payments, keeping up with taxes, keeping up with making sure those are healthy debt. You do a great job talking about there's healthy debt and there's unhealthy debt. And so let's talk about though the give piece, that generosity piece. Again, beautiful section of that book. And even the personal stories you share for you or your wife and daughter, and so again, I encourage people to read that, and you can mention whatever you want. But when you think about that, what does generosity, the give piece of that pie, what does or can that do for someone in their faith? And I was reading the book, and I was thinking, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And that's a silly question, but like, does generosity, you make the decision to be generous in these ways, and then it changes you, or is it you wait for change to be generous? And I'm kind of joking, but it does seem like that can create a positive cyclical cycle of it changing you and you wanting to be more generous. But it's like, you got to start somewhere, right? So
yeah,
maybe you're talking to somebody who's like, I'd like to think I care about it, but what does a generosity piece do spiritually?
Yeah.
In someone's heart? How does it affect you? And not just the impact it makes on maybe whatever you're giving toward, but really at a personal level when you think about generosity.
Yeah, one of the things I talk about is giving breaks the power of money.
Yeah.
And in my own story, I talk about when is the best time to get started on giving, and the answer is now. No. Because I think a lot of people, and I don't fault people for this, but they will think, I'll get started when I get some more money.
Right.
And I don't think that's what God is calling us to do. And I remember in my own story that 16 years ago, when I was really wrestling with this, I said, I'm just going to start being more generous. And I remember thinking, this is kind of nerve-wracking because, number one, I want to maintain the lifestyle that my family was accustomed to, but I was also worried that maybe my spouse might get upset with me because maybe she thought I was being too generous. And I'm sitting here with you today, and I can look back and go, you know what? God was faithful every step of the way.
Yeah.
And that comforts me a lot and can comfort other people. But I think when people ask me, when is the best time to start giving? I think it is now. The other thing, I'm a big fan of Randy Alcorn, and I love his quote where he says, God doesn't prosper us to raise our standard of living. He prospers us to raise our standard of giving.
Dude, I love that quote.
Yeah. But it does, and I can say for my own journey, it really does break the power of money, because I tend to look at things through the lens of, when more money comes my way, or I've had some success, I look at it through the lens of what can I do with generosity with what I've been blessed with.
Dude, that's awesome. And that is like, that's gotta be exhilarating to be able to think of it that way. Yeah. Like, there's so much more purpose and meaning, and you do a great job talking about this. Like, there's something that is a longer lasting satisfaction, a longer lasting joy that comes from that than frivolous spending in certain ways on self. Yeah. There's a place for a little, like, it's not like there's zero of that in our lives, or ways that we can, again, do that with our family or whatever that might look. But really, when you think about that growing side of that, and it's like, how do we make a bigger impact? How do we, that's, I don't know, that is more exciting, and inviting God into through prayer and discernment, saying, God, how do you do that? And letting that be a more of a motivation, because the Bible has a lot to say about, life does not consist in abundance of possessions. That's right. It's just not life. Yeah. You might have them, but that's not life.
That's right.
And to not put your weight down on those things as the point or the purpose. I want to read, speaking of quotes, I want to read a quote from you.
Okay.
That really, there's a few, but I want to read one from page 36 in your book. You say in the generosity chapter, generosity and legacy chapter, you say, therefore, I must clarify that generosity is not merely sending what we have in excess. It is prudently carving into our budgets a place for those in need, a place of precedence rather than of leftovers.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that every financial decision is also a moral one, where the choices we make echo our values and resonate with our faith. Dude, that is quite a beautiful paragraph.
Yeah.
When you hear your own words there, like, I mean, you said it so well, so I don't know if it's, you can say it better than that, but that really struck me. It's echoing our values and our faith. But generosity is not something that is just the leftovers, kind of we're kind of tippers, church Christian tippers on our, it's really like, it's something that deeply is a part of the heart and the character of God. So, if you're talking to somebody out there who's really got some anxiety or hesitation to really lean in, and it's not just this dollar amount you got to meet, or even a percentage that's just like rigidly, but the heart of it, what would you encourage someone, to take a step and trusting God with that? What would you tell somebody that's like, man, I don't know, like, there's this tightness, this white knuckle kind of attitude with it.
Yeah. The one thing I've learned in my journey is the world doesn't need more X's and O's. What we really need with this whole faith and finance conversation is we need heart change. So one of the things that I'm trying to affect is getting people to change their hearts, because I believe until your heart gets changed, you're never going to consider what more radical generosity would look like in your life. And as you were reading that, it's kind of fun to have your words read back to you.
Yeah, I know. You're like, wow, I wrote that?
Yeah, I was
That
like,
is good. You
man,
know?
that must have been like an inspirational moment or something.
It stuck out. There's a few. It stuck out to me like, boom.
Yeah.
I like reread it.
Well,
I was like,
the word that as you were reading that, the word that popped into my head is the word intentional.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
It's and it kind of goes back to the
It's one of my favorite words, by the way.
It goes back to the whole pie thing, is that because I think a lot of people, and once again, I mean, I don't fault people for this, but a lot of people give leftovers, right? And I think we just have to be more intentional about our spending priorities and where our money is being directed. I was also thinking about, and I heard this from a good friend of mine, and I love this. He said, "No one is remembered for what they kept."
Oh,
So think about that. I went to it like, I went to a funeral last week, so I'm kind of thinking about that.
That's
But it's like,
fascinating.
they don't sit there and go, let me tell you all the things this person kept. It's like, no, this person.
it's a great way to phrase
Right?
that, man. Yeah. Yeah. The generosity legacy side, and hopefully for the glory of God.
Yes.
But I think I know that's what you mean. But it is like, what impact and what legacy did you leave?
Yeah.
It's a legacy of faith, but one of those areas is, how did you use your time, your talent, your treasure, your money,
Yeah.
your possessions? There's all these things that is given to you by God, and how did you use those, not for self,
That's right.
but to further people and the message of Jesus? So both just caring for people, loving your neighbor as yourself, and very selfless ways, but also just promoting the gospel of Jesus in a variety of ways that can look. And some of that's through just actions and serving and meeting needs, and some of that is through real more direct spreading of the gospel in certain ways. And you're totally right. I mean, the impact people made is when they were selfless, generous, and intentional with the way that they lived their whole pie in these ways. So so intentionality, again, it's one of my favorite words when I think about the life of a disciple, the devotedness. Acts 2:42, they devoted themselves to. It's this devotion. It takes intentionality. They're committed. They're focused, and their eyes are on something eternal that they're focused on, not just the temporal.
Well, here's another
please.
here's another thing that we wrestle with people around the whole generosity thing. Ron Blue, who is the co-founder of Kingdom Advisors, has a great saying. He says, "Do your giving while you're living, so you're knowing where it's going."
Yes.
So that, once again, I think God puts tension around a lot of things.
Right.
The tension is, do you give stuff away while you're here, or do you give stuff through your estate planning, your will? Well, if you think about it, it doesn't take a lot of faith to give it once you're gone.
Right.
It takes a way more faith to give it while you're here.
Yeah. I'm going to paraphrase something I read from Randy Alcorn in the Treasure Principle book that he has. And again, a great read. So I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
But I remember him saying something about this principle that you're talking about. And he basically is like, I don't want, and he might have been quoting Warren Buffett, but I can't prove that. Okay. Basically, like, I don't want my kids to make these decisions for me and it wasn't like a selfish thing.
Yeah.
It was something like, I can't guarantee that my kids will have the same priorities with how I want this money to be used. And so to ensure that it's going to be used in that way, there's an intentional planning and decision-making while you're still alive. And whether it's immediately given, like while you're alive, or earmarked, legally in paperwork where it will go to these specific causes, and charities or whatever. And it's not to completely rob your family of any blessings, but it is one of those, especially those who really have that opportunity. There's something about, you get to tell your money where to go to ensure that it gets used for these purposes that your heart had in mind as the Lord was blessing that growth and allowing you to build that for the kingdom. And I remember hearing that and thinking, that's interesting, because I think there is another mindset out there that's just like, man, this will pay for your kids' college and their kids' college and their kids' college for generation, almost like a, and there's a place for that in different ways, but there's something about, I want to ensure this goes to the kingdom. And I think, you have the right and ability to make sure that gets stewarded.
That's right.
Even if it's for your kids, I think again, I'm not here to give financial advice. I'm just saying, like, I thought that principle was, make those decisions while you're alive. Don't just leave those up to someone else.
That's right.
Later, again, not to be just controlling and possessive, but to ensure that they're used for God's glory. I think there's something to that. I really do.
I think one of the interesting things about where we are in kind of the evolution of our society is we are now in the midst of the largest transfer of wealth in the history of the world. It's happening right now.
Fascinating.
And this is Christian, non-Christian. The sad thing about it is, first of all, I think the stats say 2/3 of families have done no planning around this.
Yeah.
And the ones that have done planning, it seems to me a lot of times the default is, well, we're just going to split it amongst our kids. And there's just a total lack of intentionality.
Yeah.
Because as I tell people, when you're gone, your money can only go 3 places. It can go to charity or kingdom causes, it can go to your family and friends, or it can go to the government, right? And a lot of people just take that default position. And, one of our responses to that is, does it make sense to treat your children equally, or should you be treating them uniquely?
Oh.
And most people have never thought about it like that. So, but it kind of comes back to that. Do you do your giving while you're living?
Yeah.
Or
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. That is so good. I hope people are listening. I hope they really think about whether it's the greatest transfer of wealth right now, that piece for people, maybe they're on that side of it right now, or coming up on it, or even potentially even those who are recipients of that.
Yes.
And saying, all right, what then, how does that affect the pie? What are the priorities? What are my values and my faith going to tell that money in healthy, surrendering it to Jesus? And not that 100% of it has to go to like giving.
Right.
I think that's like, okay, it is like, again, that's the mindset of like, that's the only part that's the kingdom part. And it's like, no, not like
it's everything.
It's everything. So,
that's right.
But this intentionality and that prayerful ask Jesus, like, are you okay out there asking Jesus? I think people are terrified to say, Jesus, what do you want me to do with my money? What do you want me to do with my pie? Like, if you're listening, are you brave enough, courageous enough to ask Jesus to give you the wisdom and discernment to steward your pie? I think that's challenging for a lot of people because they actually don't particularly they wouldn't say it that way. They don't maybe actually want Jesus that's the separation, right? That's why we separated.
That's why I come back to that.
We want it separated as humans.
Because we want control.
Because we want control.
We want control.
And we don't want to feel guilty about it,
That's
And
right.
so Jesus doesn't want to make you feel guilty about it, but he does want to lead you into not only kingdom-minded things, but just what is really life, what is really joy, what is really content, where does it come from? It's from him. And there's ways that looks in the whole pie that I think he wants the whole life for you, abundant life for you. And
That's right.
I always say the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but Jesus has come to give you life and life abundantly. But that takes that letting Jesus be Lord over all of it to really experience that abundant life.
Well, what's been interesting to me in my journey is, and I'm a work in progress, like everybody else.
Me too.
But the more I release, the more I let go, I just find there's less stress in my life around money.
Yes.
I just, one of the questions I ask people is, how do you demonstrate your faith through your finances? And kind of comes back to that, all spending decisions are spiritual decisions.
Right.
And I tell people, like, if most decisions I make financially, I bathe it in prayer. I'm like, all right, God, it's yours. So what do you want me to do? And I think the other thing that I talk a lot about, and to me, this is kind of the drop the mic moment, is either you believe, and this comes right out of Psalm 24:1, either you believe God owns it all or you don't.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then you're going to have troubles moving forward in this space.
Yeah.
You got to get your arms around he owns it all. And that kind of comes back to that whole heart thing.
Yeah.
Until you change your heart. Because as I like to say, your behavior will flow out of your beliefs, right?
Yeah.
But your beliefs will flow out of your heart. And so until there's heart change, I can give you all kinds of X's and O's and all this other. It doesn't matter. You have to change your heart.
Yeah, maybe we should call it faith nances. So like combining faith and finances, faith nances.
Yes.
I don't know, it's like it's something that is not so separate. It's something that he either owns it all or he doesn't. It's either he's either Lord of all or he's not. And I think that's challenging. I think we got to live in it, like you said.
Yeah.
We're on that journey, and but it's a good clarifying question to ask ourselves: is what's the evidence? Even just at a personal heart level between you and the Lord, like. What evidence is there, Jesus, that you are Lord over my finances? All of it.
Yeah.
What's the evidence? And I encourage you personally or as a couple or family to be praying together. I know that's probably not normal. It should be, though, but it's not. To be praying and asking God to help you steward all that. And even, especially if you have kids, like I know not everybody out there has kids, but like invite them into the prayers of God, how do you want us to be generous? What are ways that we can really be your hands and feet to other people, your instruments of peace to other people through the way that you use and steward? I think there's a discipleship opportunity for people who are parents with their kids to help them grow up with a better mindset than you had, or maybe even have as you're on your journey, inviting your kids into what you're learning. Because I think a lot of people become adults and haven't really been discipled in that way. And so I want to encourage parents on that. I know, so you've got you and a team of people that are like eager and excited to help people have and grow in this mindset. So how can people find you and connect with you in that way?
Yep.
So that's question one. And then secondly, how can they find your book?
Yeah. So we have a website for the book. It's called Faith Finances. That's plural. faithfinancesbook.com.
Okay.
From there, you can get a free ebook if you want.
Okay.
There's also ways to connect with me if you want to talk to me, that sort of thing. My direct line, if you want to call, where I hang out every day, is 614-505-0865. And I spend most of my days over in Worthington, here in Central Ohio. And we're here for people. We're trying to help people on this journey. Like I said, we're all work in progress type people.
Oh, yeah.
But we're learning a lot of things and having a lot of breakthroughs and insights. And we just share that with people and help them in their journey.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I know it's helpful because I personally have been blessed by it. And one thing that's cool about this book is, like you said, you can get the free ebook, but even this on Amazon, you're basically doing at cost. Like this is like what, $3-4?
It's $3-4. Yeah.
Yeah. Out the door.
Yeah.
And you're trying to just make sure that people have this resource. I love your heart in that and your generosity in that. And guys, it's worth a read. And I bet if you're a local person, I'm sure there's some way to twist his arm to get it signed. That's a bonus, but no, I appreciate you having this conversation. I really appreciate you championing this topic in using your faith and your experience in this sector to really say, how do I help people have more of a faith and kingdom mindset that it honors God and grows as a disciple and really unleashes this beautiful part that affects so much of our lives. So thank you for doing that. And again, I hope you'll connect with Michael. And Michael, any final encouragements or words to people out there?
Yeah, I think this is a journey. Like as you, I think, mentioned, like you don't show up on day one and everything is great.
Right.
So it's a journey. It's an imperfect journey. I don't think any of us totally get there.
Sure.
Until we cross over to heaven.
Yep.
And, I've just, it was interesting. A few years back, I went through this program called Prime Movers that is inspired by Chip Ingram.
Yes.
And it's all about getting to the essence of your holy ambition. And from the work that I did in that, three things, and I love triangles and the rule of three, But three things that came out of that were my holy ambition was tied around discipleship, God, and money.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was validation for me. And so, as I say to a lot of people, I am just on a mission to encourage as many people as I can to live out their faith through their finances based on biblical principles. Because the one question that is always in the back of my mind is that when I cross over and I get to meet Jesus, I have this feeling that one of the questions he may ask me is, what did you do with what I gave you?
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that my answer is a good answer and other people have a good answer for Jesus when they cross over.
Yeah, I mean, some people are terrified of that question, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't feel ready to answer that. But I think that's the motivation, not shame and guilt, but it's a motivation to say,
That's right.
No, until that day, I mean, I'm not done. I can grow in this. How do I grow? Just have a heart posture to want that.
That's right.
And I think that's an eternal perspective that we should have.
That's right.
I actually had a conversation yesterday with a brother on the topic of am I being faithful with what God has given me holistically? And it's something that we should be running some filters through. But it can be motivating and exciting and encouraging to think, God, like, I want that. I want to be able to not give a perfect answer, but it to be more than evident that I was seeking to live it all for you. So Michael, thank you for being an example of that. Thank you for being on this podcast and conversation for Better Equipped and helping equip people with the grace and truth of Jesus in this way. Make sure you reach out to Michael and be encouraged by him, get the book, and we'll see you on the next episode.